Hi everyone, Bruchim Habayim, welcome. Tonight's Torah on Tap class is dedicated L'Nishmat and in loving memory of Shokrala Baruch ben Rachamim Nasi, alav shalom, by his grandson Mitch Adut, who is not here yet, but he'll be here B'ezrat Hashem, and he'll be able to watch this, God willing, and it should be a schut for his memory. So a big thank you to Mitch for sponsoring. Okay. So as you know, Monday nights when I'm here, I try to do a little bit of what's going on in the world today, something from the headlines, and there is no lack in the headlines to what's happening in terms of the Jewish calendar especially. And I don't know if you've been watching this, there's a lot of very disturbing images coming out of Israel today. It's sad, ironic, that this is the 9 days from Rosh Chodesh Av till Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. And this is a time that we always talk about how the destruction of the first and second Beit HaMikdash came around because of disunity among our people. We know there was a lot of disunity among the Jewish people in the building up stages to destruction of the first and especially the second Beit HaMikdash. And here we are, 2023, thousands of years later, and we still having a big problem when it comes to unity, achdut, between our people. So I don't want to talk too much about that because it upsets me greatly, and I don't want to do politics tonight, but I do want to speak about the idea of leadership and the role of a leader when it comes to dealing with division and disunity among our people. Because we're only going to be able to bring Mashiach and build the third and final temple when we have achdut. Not just the person who sponsored this shiur, but we have real unity among our people in Israel and throughout the entire world. So let's talk about Jewish leadership. Now, Jewish leadership can mean a couple of things. It can mean leadership by Jewish people, right? That's Jewish leadership. But it can also mean leadership in a Jewish way, which is not, by the way, limited to just Jewish people. And sadly, there are many Jewish people who lead who don't lead in a Jewish way at all. And so this is going to be something we're going to have to figure out this evening. So I want to start. I have a lot to tell you. I'm going to crunch it down to 30 minutes or so to get enough time to schmooze and to eat before the next shiur. But there's a few themes that come up. And one of the themes that's coming up in Israel, if those people are following the situation over there, though it's difficult to fully grasp it because there are two very strong sides. But there's one theme that you keep hearing again and again and again, and that is checks and balances. How nobody wants too much power in one person's hands. Is that a Jewish principle? Is it a Jewish thing to say that we don't want too much power in one person's hands? Is that something we believe in as Jews? I mean, let's talk about the great Jewish leaders, not individuals, but positions of Jewish leadership. You have, well, give me examples. Who holds a lot of power in the Jewish world? You have a king, a melech. A melech has tremendous power. So much power that he can decide to do pretty much whatever he wants to do within the confines of the Torah. For example, let's say a king is walking down the street and he sees a beautiful home, and he's like, that'll be great addition to my palace. He could theoretically take that for himself. He wants to knock down and take property from someone else in order to expand his own. He can do it. He thinks someone is treasonous against him and God and his nation and the land of Israel. He can become the judge, the jury, and the executioner. So the king has tremendous power. Is that a problem? Yeah. That's a big problem. That's open to a lot of corruption. As the expression goes, I've heard this expression ascribed to different people, but power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And the Jewish king is even the great, honest, righteous Jewish kings, there have been some pretty bad ones, but even the good ones have laws that really try to limit their power. They shouldn't have too much gold and too much silver. They shouldn't have too many horses, which today would be too many sports cars or whatever it is. They've got to be able to contain it, because the Torah and God, who gave us the Torah, is very nervous that the power is going to come through and they're going to overdo it. So we have a number of mitzvot when it comes to the king which limit his power. We've mentioned before that a king even has to write a Sefer Torah and carry that Sefer Torah with him in his pocket or in his hand or around his neck all the time, to remind him that he's a subject of God like anyone else, although he has tremendous power. Who else has power in the Jewish world? Historically speaking, at least. Although this, well, maybe today not so much, but it will be again. The priest, the Kohanim, they also had power. They controlled the city of Yerushalayim. They were involved in the Beit HaMikdash. They were working with families. They were spread out throughout the land of Israel. There's a third group that had tremendous power, and that is the prophets. You got kings, you got priests, and you got prophets. And those are the three main groups. Now, who is the prophet? Who could be a prophet? We know that only one person in a generation can be a king, a melech. We know that only those people who come from the tribe of Levi, specifically through the tribe of Aaron, a Kohen, can be a priest, a Kohen. But a prophet is open to everyone. A man, a woman, an elderly person, a young person, that's open. So the king is the political leader. The priest is the spiritual leader, and the prophet is the visionary. They look into the future. Of those three, I want you to think about this for just a few moments. Of those three groupings we mentioned, kings, priests, and prophets, two of them incessantly get into fights with each other. Do you know which two of those three are always at odds in Tanakh, in Jewish scriptures, in Jewish history? Story after story, it's always two of those three. Which would you say of those three? Which two are always at loggerheads? I mean, like, to the point that they're almost killing each other. Actually, many times, they did actually kill each other. Which two of those three? What do you think? The kings and the prophets. Yeah, very good. Thank you. The kings and the prophets. Why? What's their problem? So the king, and you can apply this in modern times as well. The king is saying, I am the political leader. He wasn't always the smartest. He wasn't always the most righteous. But he was given tremendous political power over his people, over the land. If he wants to go to war, you've got to go to war. If he says we're going to overtake that piece of land, you've got to go with him. And if a soldier doesn't want to fight with the king when he says, come with me to this war to fight in order to protect the land or to increase the size of the land, he could kill someone. That's considered treason. So he has tremendous power. Now the prophet is the other side. Think about it for a second. What's the Navi? What is the prophet saying? The prophet's like, you're crazy. You want us to start overtaking land and killing people? Think about the repercussions of doing this. Because every move you make now, there's a butterfly effect, and it's going to end up impacting the future of our people, of our nation. You don't see it now. So the king, as the political leader, is thinking now, how do I increase my power now? How do I protect my country now? The prophet's like, you're crazy, man. Because if you do that in 5 years, 10 years, you don't see it now. But in 20 years and 100 years, we're going to pay the price for this. Now, no king in his right mind wants to have a prophet tell him what to do. Who are you? You're not of royal blood. You don't come from the tribe of Judah like I do. Could have come from any Shevet, right? We know that Mordechai and Esther came from Shevet Binyamin, and they were great prophets and prophetesses. So they could turn around and they'd be like, no, but if you just think about now, what's going to be the repercussions? And we're seeing this today, my friends. Now, we don't have kings or prophets today, but we're seeing two groups. And I think what we're seeing today in the land of Israel, and actually every Jewish organization that I've ever known or worked for, always has a battle that comes from this. There's one side that says, this is what we need to do now. And there's the other side like, it may make sense for now, but where's this going to lead? In 1 year, in 2 years, in 5 years, and in 10 years. And this, my friends, is the battle within every Jewish decision that is being made today in Israel, outside of Israel, in a Jewish organization, in a charitable organization, in a school, a yeshiva, a bet knesset. It's now versus the future. That, my friends, is what I call Jewish checks and balances. It may sound terrible, because if you look at it on the screen, or you look at the synagogue or the yeshiva, they're arguing and they're fighting and they're saying, but actually, that's a good thing. Because if the king did whatever he wanted to do, and the prime minister did whatever he wanted to do, and if the rabbi did whatever, that never happens, by the way. That never, ever, ever happens. There's always trouble for the rabbi, right? And if the prophet and the guy who runs the treasury does whatever he wants to do, it's big trouble. There's a fascinating story about someone called Yehonatan. Yehonatan, not the Jonathan who was the son of King Saul, a different Jonathan. He was a descendant of Moshe Rabbeinu. And Jonathan had, we're told, a tremendous desire for money. He couldn't get enough of it. So much so that he was stealing money all the time. And it came, and he was a very notable and famous individual, and King David discovered this. David HaMelech heard about this guy Jonathan, and he had to figure out what to do with him. What would you have done with him? Put him in prison, send him away, admonish him, I don't know, kill him, whatever. Instead, he did something unbelievable. Does anyone know what he did to this guy Jonathan? Yehonatan? The second most famous Yonatan in Jewish history, probably. He turned around to him and said, I see you have a desire for money. I see it. I understand that this is a problem for you. And so I'm going to put you in charge of the temple treasury. Now, the temple treasury had a lot of money coming in and coming out. You've got to basically think about the biggest synagogue you've ever heard of, and all the money that comes in and out of it, all the charitable donations, right? You've got the Suda Shlishit, you've got the salary, you've got the electricity. It's a lot of money that's coming into a synagogue. Now you've got the biggest, most famous synagogue in the entire world. You can imagine how much money was coming in and out. And the Gemara says, the David HaMelech says, this is the perfect job for you. Why would he do that? Why would he do that? What kind of leadership trait is that? The guy who's famous for stealing, and by the way, it worked. It really, really worked. He put him in charge, and he took on the job, and he was, they say, the best runner of the treasury in the Beit HaMikdash that had ever existed. Everyone loved him, and he was honest, and every penny that came in was accounted for. Every penny that went out was accounted for. He did an amazing job. So there's two parts to this story. One is him, Jonathan, is that when he was given the responsibility of being a great leader that was given to him by the king, King David himself, he jumped up and he took that position amazingly. Now, King David at this point was not alive. He had passed on because he wasn't involved in the building of the temple. But he took on the responsibility that was given to him by King David, and he did an amazing job when it came to raising and running the funds. You just have to sometimes, you know, people have this terrible character trait, and then you channel it the right way, and it becomes amazing. You know what I'm talking about? Jonathan is the situation. But King David, where did he learn this from? Where did David HaMelech learn this idea? Did he think of it himself? And the answer is no. King David, who's one of the greatest leaders, military and other leaders of Jewish history, he actually learned it from his great grandmother. Who was King David's great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother? Ruth. Ruth. Right? Right? Ruth was the person. And what do we learn about her? There's a very, very famous story in the book of Ruth. She was a convert to Judaism, which, by the way, talk about taking things out of the newspapers, and this is meant to be like what's happening. The amount of converts, I don't know if you're aware of this, that are joining the Jewish people now, I would say it's unprecedented for thousands of years. I was just in Europe. I was in Germany for the first time. Nice country. I was in, very well run, surprisingly, and maybe unsurprisingly. I was just in Prague, which is the nicest city in Europe, by the way, that I've ever been to. I haven't been to every city in Europe, but the ones I've been to, it's just unbelievable. And I was in Poland, and I took a group, and we were in Auschwitz, and we were in Majdanek. Let me tell you something. 1942 Poland, not too many people were trying to become Jewish. They weren't knocking down the doors trying to convert to our people. I can guarantee. I don't have statistics on me, but I highly doubt it, that in 1942, there are many non-Jews, or the Holocaust is happening in Poland, like, make me Jewish. Maybe one or two people. It's highly unlikely. And yet today, you can't give it out. It's unbelievable. We don't have the room. There's only so much shopping allowance at Costco before we let more Jews in. You know what I'm saying? We've reached the point, my friends. We've reached saturation. Everybody wants to be Jewish. It wasn't always like this. For a lot of history, it was very, very difficult to become Jewish. And so Ruth actually becomes the archetypal vision of what a convert's all about. Now, you all know the story of Ruth and Orpah, not Oprah. Actually, Oprah was meant to be called that by mistake. They met, and being very serious, they called her Orpah, okay? And she went up to, and she said to Naomi, please, Naomi, let me join you. She's like, no. She's like, please. And she's like, you know what? I have faith in you, Naomi. Naomi, her mother-in-law, I have faith in you, says Ruth. Everything is going to be okay. Where you go, I go. Where you sleep, I sleep. You'll be with my people. Your language is my language. Your mitzvot are my mitzvot. Your sins are my sins. I'm with you. They say that's where David HaMelech learns it from. Absolute loyalty. Finding the best in a person. And that is one of the key traits in leadership. Not always looking for the best person to do the job, but to look for potential in an individual into the future. Which takes us to my next Jewish leadership trait. I got a lot of these. I'm actually working on a book on it right now, which kind of shelved for about the past 3 months, but I'm going to get back into it, B'ezrat Hashem. And that is responsibility. If you look at great Jewish leaders, now once again, when I say Jewish leadership, I don't just mean Jewish leaders. It's a way of leading, and that's what we're talking about. I'm not talking about great Jewish leaders, I'm talking about a way of leading. You'll see that great Jewish leaders, or people who use these Jewish attributes, are always into responsibility. And there's an amazing shift I must share with you that you see from Sefer Bereshit into Sefer Shemot, from the book of Genesis into the book of Exodus. How does the Torah begin? We're in the Garden of Eden. Who's there? Adam, Eve, a lot of trees, and a snake. And very quickly, Adam and Eve make a mistake, and they eat from the fruit they're not meant to eat from, and the snake gets involved, and God says, that's it. It's all over. Who's responsible for this? And what does Eve say? It was him. What does he say? It was her. What does the snake say? It was them both. Everyone is blaming everyone else. And this carries on, God bless you. It carries on. We know that soon after you have Cain and Abel, and Cain kills Hevel. And what happens? God says, what did you do that for? He goes, I didn't do it. He goes, where are you? Where's your brother? He's like, I don't know. You think you can fool God? You can't fool God. But some people really believe that they are blameless when the evidence is really, really clear. And so the lesson of Adam and Eve, not taking the blame for their mistakes and blaming everybody else, moved on to the next generation. And then it moved on, and it moved on to the time of Noah. Same problem. Like, we got a big problem out there. Not my problem. No one's taking responsibility for anybody else. They can barely take responsibility for the animals. And that's how the first book of the Torah ends. It's actually a really, really sad story. From this not taking responsibility, the entire world is destroyed from a mabul, from a flood. And then we start the book of Shemot, Exodus. And it changes completely. It turns from the us into we and the I into us. How? So Moses is there. And Moshe Rabbeinu turns up on the scene after his older sister persuades Moshe's parents to have another child because we've got to make the situation better. So she already has planted the seeds of taking responsibility for her people. And then we know the famous story of Moshe Rabbeinu going out, and he sees this Egyptian beating this Jew, and he says, oh, what am I going to do over here? And suddenly it all changes. And suddenly he's like, I'm taking responsibility. I'm going to save this Jew at the risk of his own life. Right? I mean, it was such a dangerous thing. He had to end up leaving the Jewish people and not being part of the Hebrews for like 60 years. So this was a really big decision he had to make. Everyone's like, yeah, he just killed him. It's like, it came with a lot of responsibility. And that led to the Exodus. So book 1 of the Torah, people are not taking responsibility, and the whole enterprise falls down. And book 2 opens up with taking responsibility, and that leaves us to Geula. This, say the rabbis, is a key trait for successful leadership. Do you feel responsibility towards each other? Let's go back to our initial conversation. And that is too much power in one person's hands. Is that a good thing? Well, I already proved to you it's not a good thing. You need checks and balances. Okay, here in America, we have the executive branch, we have the legislative, we have the president. But that concept really comes from the Torah, that you don't want one person with too much. Who's doing what? You want leadership to be a relationship. If there's too much power in one hand, it becomes a dictatorship. And so the Torah is like, don't have too much power with one person in one place. Set up a system. And actually, we'll talk about another convert, because there's so many of them. But now come to Jethro, Yisro. Moshe Rabbeinu is judging and judging and judging people, and he's exhausted. Right? Dealing with Jews is not easy. Just go on vacation with 6 Jews ready to shoot yourself. Imagine thousands and millions of them. Right? It's unbelievable. And Yitro, tells his son-in-law Moshe Rabbeinu, it's too much for you. You're going to have to set up other leaders. And he tells them the certain traits these leaders need to have. And he gives them a certain list of how they should act, what they should do. And he ends up doing it. And Moshe Rabbeinu, who's probably the greatest prophet, he is the greatest prophet, greatest leader in Jewish history, is very, very quick to hand over leadership power and responsibility to other people. He doesn't micromanage. Micromanagement is not a Jewish principle. It may be a principle of many Jewish people and many principles of schools, but it's not a Jewish principle. You don't want to micromanage. You want to empower other people and have them run it for you. You know, I must say a quick story. I was once meant to be on a certain trip many years ago, ironically enough, a leadership trip, you know, and I got sick and I couldn't do it. I was very upset. So I was talking to actually one of the guys who was funding the entire trip, and I said, I really want to be there. I'm very, very sick. I feel terrible. I think I should go anyway. He's like, do not go. It's not right. I had a terrible, I ended up, whatever. He said, don't go. It's going to be fine. And I said to this billionaire, I'm like, but how are they going to do it without me? Right? How are they going to do it without me? And I really meant it, you know, because I'd run the trip before and I'd recruited and I'd organized it and planned it. And he stopped and said, let me tell you something, Lawrence. He said, and these are his words. I don't know where he said he got them from his father, but I think it's a famous concept. He said, the cemetery is full of people who said, how's the world going to carry on without me? And they've all gone, and the world is still here. So don't ever say, how is it going to happen without me? Because the world is going to carry on. I'm very sorry to tell you, it's going to carry on without you, my dear friend. and the trip did go on without me, and people told me it was one of the best trips they ever did. A little hurtful, but I'm okay. I'm over it. Bit of an ego bash, but you can move on. You know where we learn this from? Unbelievable place. You would never have thought this to be true. We actually learned this out from God himself. Because God, if you think about it, is also a leader. I mean, he's not Jewish per se, because he's God of the entire, but he's also a leader. He leads us in how we should act. He gives us the Torah to help us act a certain way. So where do we learn from God not to have too much power in one hand? Because God could be like, hello, I'm God. And I'm the great leader, and you've got to listen to everything I say. And it's all about me, me, me. But even God, as it were, does something unbelievable. When he creates mankind, he does it in an amazing way. He turns around and says that we need to make mankind. So before there were humans, right? There were animals and lots of other. And he said, let us make man. Na'aseh Adam. Let us make man. In the plural. Now, if you were to read those few words, you'd be like, whoa, that's weird. There's no humans around. There's no one else on the planet. Who exactly is God talking to? You could make the mistake, and this is the big danger, that there are actually two gods. Right? It could be two gods. That's a... Now, we know they're not, right? Because later on in the Torah it says, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. So we know there's not two. But at that point, before that verse had turned up, it could be that there are more than one God, which there isn't. I just want to be very clear. Having said that, and the commentators tell us it was worth God making that statement. Why? So that you don't think that one person can do it alone. And so God himself, as it were, turns around and says, you know what? I'm going to consult with... Who does God consult with? Anybody know? Angels, right? Malachim, very good. With the angels. And says, we're going to work it out together. I don't know what it means to consult angels on anything, but there's obviously some kind of process. And the angels are below God, and God's above, and he's like, you know what? Learn from me. If I'm willing to schmooze with angels to figure out how to make mankind, you can too. Responsibility, checks and balance, not too much power. When there's fights and arguments, it isn't always... It's not a pleasant thing, but it's not always a bad thing. So I know we're watching these shocking images, those who are following it coming out of Israel, and it's not pleasant, and I don't like it. Actually, I hate it, and it upsets me. But it's a sign of a vibrant democracy, or in the Torah's words, a sign that people are banging each other to figure out what's right for the future of the Jewish people. Whatever side you take, it's people who are worried about the future of the land of Israel. These are people who are visionaries. Really, that's what we're talking about over here. I want to throw in something else over here. There's another trait of Jewish leadership, and that is to be a great Jewish leader. And by the way, when I say leader, I don't just mean a prime minister or a rabbi or a head of a school. Everyone at some point in their lives is a Jewish leader, right? You got a husband, wife, or kids, you're a leader. You help in a synagogue, you're a leader. We all take on leadership roles at least one time in our life, right, on a smaller, bigger scale. And sometimes the smaller ones are more important, but we'll leave that aside. There's another trait, and that is leaders learn. They read, and they research, and they never, ever stop reading. If you see a leader who is not constantly sharpening their sword, constantly learning and reading, it's a bad sign. One of the greatest Jewish leaders, military leaders in Jewish history, who really rarely failed at all, is Joshua, who took over from Moshe Rabbeinu. It's very interesting, by the way. Moshe Rabbeinu did the right thing. Well, he was told to by God. He made Joshua leader while he was still alive. So much so that Joshua wrote, according to one opinion, the last 9 or so Pesukim in the Torah. The last verses in the Bible, which talk about the death of Moshe Rabbeinu, were written by Joshua. What a great way to bring leadership from one overlaps the other. You know the comparison that's given over there? The sun and the moon. Moshe Rabbeinu is compared to the sun, and Yoshua is compared to the moon. Just like the moon reflects off the sun, so too Yoshua reflected off his master the light of Moshe Rabbeinu. You'll notice that there's never a time when there's just moon or just sun. There's always an overlap. There's always an overlap. You want to be able to pass over while you are still alive. I think one of the big mistakes that was done with British royalty was that didn't happen. But that's another conversation, which I have opinions on, not for now. But if you want to empower the next generation, you've got to bring them. So Yoshua, this is this amazing story. If you don't know the story, if you've heard it before, I apologize, but it's worth hearing again. Yoshua was the master of learning. He learned a lot. Actually, do you know how Yoshua got his job as one of the greatest Jewish leaders in Jewish history?
Yeah, he never left Moshe's side.
Never left Moshe. But better than that, he turned up to class before anyone else. Why? To be goody two-shoes? No. To make sure that all the chairs were set up and ready to go, and there was food, and there were drinks, and the pizza had been delivered. What was that pizza? There must have been. They were Jewish, and everything was ready to go, and it was all good and clear. And when everyone had gone, and they left the class that Moshe Rabbeinu had given, because not everyone came to every class and lecture that Moshe Rabbeinu gave, and when he made sure that everything was set up, and all the garbage was put away, and everything was cleared. Did you know that's why Joshua was chosen? One of the main reasons he was chosen for leadership? It's unbelievable. He wasn't even from the same tribe as Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu had kids. There could have been amazing nepotism that could have happened in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu had children. We know they are. Gershom and Eliezer. They said, oh, they're great. They're my sons. They take over. Like every dictatorship, it's always the sons who take over. Sometimes the daughters, right? Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il. It's always like the next one takes over. The next Meshuggah takes over on the one who came before. In this case, no. It says it's not right. Joshua takes over. Now, Joshua was famous for being a very caring, very loyal subject to his master, but he was also very famous for learning. Listen to this unbelievable story. Joshua is about to enter into the land of Israel. He's about to fight his battles, right? We're going to have to defeat Jericho and Ai. And if you look in the book of Joshua, which when I was in yeshiva, I became obsessed with this book of Joshua because all the stories in the Torah are about what's going to happen when they get into Israel, and they're all in the book of Joshua. And there's a lot of battles. Actually, a lot of the battles you see in the book of Yoshua, in the book of Joshua, are studied in military academies around the world. I have a friend who's a rabbi in West Point, which is actually not far from where I live. It's like 15 minutes away from me. And he says we actually study military battles throughout history, and we actually use some of the battles from the book of Joshua. Certain attacks and techniques actually come from there. So he's about to, the night before his battle. What do you do the night before your battle? What do most people do? What does any normal, you try to get a good night's sleep, I guess, right? But if you're a leader, you're gearing the troops up and you're practicing warfare. And that's what Joshua was doing. He took out his sword and he was whipping it around because he's about to lead. Notice that. Moshe Rabbeinu, they don't lead from the back. You always lead from the front. It's another Jewish leadership truth. Always lead from them. You don't just send off your troops, right? If you're able to, even Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was very, very old, and the Jewish people are fighting Amalek, he couldn't fight. He was very old at that point, and yet, what does he do? He holds up his hands the entire time. The whole time his hands are up, they win. The whole time his hands are down, he got so tired that he had two people, Aaron and Pinchas, hold up his hands. Caleb, hold up his hands so he can hold them up. What does that mean, holding up his hands? Why is he holding up his hands? What's he doing? Hey, I'm here. He's like, I'm with you. I can't fight, I'm too old, right? But I'm here, I'm with you the entire time. Right? What a beautiful, what a great symbol to send people. I can't be involved in your battle, I can't be involved in the business, and I can't be involved in the synagogue, but you know what? I'm here, right? And they could see him. He was up on a mountain, and instead of on a stone so everyone could see him, hold him up. And they looked up, they're like, oh, you know what? Moshe Rabbeinu's with us. I feel good. So what's Joshua doing the night before the battle? He takes his sword and he's whipping it around. And then it says in the book of Joshua that he sees someone walk towards him. And he realizes it's not an ordinary person. He realizes very quickly that it's an angel. And the angel has a fiery appearance. And the angel is holding out a sword. Is that a good sign or a bad sign? It's a terrible sign. You don't want an angel holding out a sword. Because if someone's facing you with a sword in their hand, what are they about to say? You're about to die. And so Joshua sees this and says, who are you? And he says, I'm an angel of God. At first he thinks, I don't know, maybe he's a regular person with a sword. And Joshua falls on his face, which is a very popular technique for people about to meet angels. And he falls on his face and said, well, what are you doing here? And the angel says, I'm here to kill you. It's like, I'm sorry, what did you say? And the angel says, I am going to kill you. You now deserve to die. And Joshua says, what did I do? I'm about to go to battle. It's a terrifying moment. We're about to enter into the land of Israel. After all these years, I was made leader. And I'm just preparing myself for the battle the next day. And the angel says, that's not how a Jew prepares for battle. The night before it's like, well, what am I meant to be doing? And the angel says, you're meant to put your sword away and you're meant to learn Torah. Because I learn Torah all the time. I'm very learned. And he says, no, you're not learning Torah to know what to do. You're learning Torah to show that you are a person who is going to win this battle in the merit of the Torah. That's what he said to him. Unbelievable. And Joshua, life was spared. He understood, and he spent the rest of the night learning and preparing himself. And by the way, this is an ancient Jewish technique. Before Jewish people go in for big meetings or for battles, there was actually a person called the Kohen Mashiach. Ever heard of this before? It's a role. He's a Kohen. He's not the Mashiach, because if he was the Mashiach, he couldn't be a Kohen. That's two different tribes. He was called the Kohen Mashiach. They don't know what it is. He had a really unbelievable job, which actually still exists in the Israeli army today. They don't call him the Kohen Mashiach, but that's his job. What is the Kohen Mashiach's job? You're about to go to war, and he'll get the guys together. He's like, you know what you need to do. And they've all got the battle plans. But before we go in, we need to say Shema, and we need to prepare ourselves spiritually and mentally for this battle. Because there's a battlefield we're about to fight in, but there's also the battlefield of our minds. And that's what Yeshua taught us. And that's what the Kohen Mashiach's job was. And he would say, I know you're scared, and I know you've left your families and your spouses and your businesses in order to fight to defend the Jewish people, but God is with you, and he would uplift them with his words. That was, I think, the main job of this guy, the Kohen Mashiach. He was there just to waken up the spirit of the soldiers before they went out to war. We learned that out from Yeshua. Before you go to battle, whatever your battle is as a Jewish leader, I must say, this story just came to my head. It's a true story. This happened 6 weeks ago. I was present at a battle. I mean, a really nasty battle between a divorced man and woman who were trying to figure out who was going to get what money. My friends, it doesn't get uglier than that. And I was there with my wife. Baruch Hashem, we were not that couple. I was there with my wife, representing one, and there were other people representing, and we all came together because it's been dragging on for years, this whole thing. This is sadly very common. I don't usually get involved in this stuff, but for whatever reason, I had to be there at this time in order to show support for one of the people present. And friends, when it comes to money, it gets ugly. So we were there. There was a rabbi there, a very, very holy individual, and things were getting, I mean, it had gone for a long time, and it was getting very unpleasant. Unpleasant. Details of children and money and vacation, just whatever. I'll tell you what happened. This is a true story. I promise you this happened. The rabbi said, stop everything. And he banged his hand down, and he said the following words. I swear to you this is true. I need to go get my ammunition. That's what he said. I'm like, oh my God. And this is the sweetest, most holy rabbi. I thought he was going to come with a gun, because that's where things were heading, I'm telling you. He left. He came back. This is a true story. I promise you, with a book. It was a Sefer Tehillim, and he put his hand on it. If I can't remember exactly, I think he read a little bit, and he said, okay, now we can continue. But the entire mood changed after that. How do you carry on as normal, right? After this great holy man who's there acting as an intermediary, as a mediator, because I'm on one side, and he's there, and he put his hand and says, okay, now we can continue. I have my ammunition. That's what he called it, I promise you. I never thought of it that way. But it fits in very much what we're talking about tonight. You know? What is your ammunition? You're going to go to war against a company, against people, friends. We put our faith in Hashem, and we show that by learning. Leaders learn. Leaders learn. You know, I tell you, there's a library I went to many years ago, David Ben Gurion Library, I think it's in Tel Aviv. I mean, this guy, I know religious people love to take a bash at him. He wasn't religious and this and the other. I tell you the truth. I've seen interviews with him. He was a Ma'amin. He believed in Hashem. I'm telling you, he had a library of 20,000 books. Literally, if you go to his house, there's thousands of them. Literally, his walls are made up of books. There's no way he could have read all those books. There's just no way. And you come to my house, all right? I got books and books and books. I haven't read them all. But it's good to have that on your wall, you know? It's good to show people that this is who I am. I may not act always the best way. There's room for improvement. This is who I am. You know, as a side point, I wasn't going to mention this, but I must mention this. When I was a kid, I used to have a lot of posters on my walls in my bedroom. As at college, you know? I used to have sports cars with, on the wall, sometimes with a person sitting on it, sometimes not. You know what I'm talking about? That's the way it was. We had posters on walls. Be very careful who you put on the walls of your home. Because when you put someone on the walls of your home, you're saying that this is my role model. That's what you're saying, whether you realize it or not. When you put a piece of art in your home on the wall, and I've been to houses and I've looked at the art and I'm like, I don't believe a Jewish home would have a piece of art up on the wall that looks like this. This is the antithesis. Your children are seeing this. When you put something up on your wall, what are you saying? This is who I respect and this is who I want to be. In some sense, this is what I want to represent me. And I've been to houses and there's art on the wall which is indecent with curse words on it. I'm like, how can you do that? How can you send this message to your children? This is not the way we act. You know? And so people will put football players and baseball players and movie stars. And I did as a kid too. I used to have it too. But in my house, that's not the way it is. You walk into my son's bedroom, for good or bad, right? And he loves sports a lot. But his walls are covered in rabbanim, in great rabbis. I'm hoping very, very much that these people are going to be mashbiah. He wakes up in the morning with it. It's subliminal, but it's being sucked into his head. These are the great people. These are the leaders I wanted to see every single day. Be very simple. Walk into my son's room. You'll see baseball mitts and this, that. But you'll see 30, 40 photos and drawings of great rabbis in Jewish history. And you come downstairs to my home, and you'll see artwork. You'll see nice designs, of course. Nothing wrong with that. You'll see Jewish symbolism on the walls. Who you put on the walls of your home, whether your home now, your future home, especially when you have kids, is a representation of who you want them to be. It's a big, big deal. Role models. Who are going to be the great Jewish role models that you want to put onto your walls and roles? Let's just recap, because I said a lot, I realize that. We said leadership is about responsibility, taking achrayut. No one can lead alone. Even God says, Nasa Adam, let us make man. God consulted with the angels before he created mankind, as if to say, even I'm not going to do it alone. And we learn from David HaMelech, from King David, one of the greatest things that you can do is to bring responsibility to those people who don't think they can be responsible. Or maybe you haven't been acting so amazingly up to now. And be like, my life is over, I'm a complete loser, there's no way I can help my people, or my nation, or my country, or my family, or my friends. Empower. And we said there is checks and balances. We see that from the kings, and the priests, and the prophets. And just because you're seeing Jewish people fight and argue, it's unpleasant, it doesn't always mean it's the worst thing. It means that we are being responsible for each other, and ultimately, the greatest responsibility we have for ourselves is to learn. And that's what we learn out from Yoshua. Joshua taught us that the most important way to prepare for the battle outside on the field or inside ourselves is to study the Torah, look back at history, and see how our ancestors dealt with things. That is the greatest Jewish ammunition. We'll stop over there, my dear friends. Thank you very much for being here.